Okay, so I'm just going to show us a very basic example of using Matplotlib, and then we'll continue to, okay, I think firstplot.py is what we're going to look at. Okay, so I've opened up a very short Python program here, and just at the top, all I've done, this is not something you're going to need to do when you're creating your plots, but the default font size in Matplotlib is pretty small, and so when these are being generated on my screen to show all you, I just wanted to make the font size bigger. And so what is happening here is, like we've done before, I'm importing matplotlib, which is a Python package, and then I'm just letting it know, hey, reassign in this .rc is saying the sort of configuration, reassign this font information to be this dictionary, which is something we've seen. And so this is going to make the font size bigger. But what we really should be paying attention to is the code down here. So does anybody remember when we imported NumPy? What did we import it as? Yeah. So just like with NumPy, it's very common to use an alias for the specific part of Matplotlib that we are interested in using, which is this pyplot right here. And so one thing, so this aliasing is not new to us. We've seen import numpy as np, but what we might not have seen is that we can actually not just import the entire package under a new name, but we can actually import a specific sort of entire set of functionality, and that's what we're doing here. So now, whenever we can just type plt, and that is telling Python to, okay, within matplotlib, within pyplot, now let's call whatever function we want to call. And so pyplot is the part of matplotlib that we will be using in this course. And here it's built to be like MATLAB, which if you haven't used MATLAB, that's kind of not useful to you, but that's just how it is. But what we'll do is we'll tend to use this plot function. And so how we plot things in general, the big idea here is that within pyplot, which we're calling plt, we'll call .plot. We'll pass in some data. For example, we can also set things like the y label. And then if we want to actually show this on our screen, we need to call plt.show. And so we'll just take a look and run this and see what happens. Always a good first step. And so can anybody want to take a stab at like describing what happened here? So was everybody able to run this if you wanted to? Okay, so we passed in, let's see, what data did we pass in? We passed in 1, 2, 3, 4. And so, and we said, change the y label to be, some numbers. And so we see that we did set our y label to be some numbers. Why, like, okay, it looks like we're going like, we've got a point at 1, 0, we've got a point at 1, 2, we've got a point at 2, 3, 3, 4. Can anybody tell me why we have these specific points? How did we get these x values? Yeah, so it's automatically, we pass in this list, and since Python is zero-based, so it always indexes starting from 0, it just automatically inferred that our first x value is 0, second x value is 1, etc. And so if we want to pass in, we want to specify what our x and y values are, we can put in x comma y. So we can plot, let's say I want my x values to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and now let's say I want to display sort of an x squared plot. So I've got 1, 1, 2 squared is going to be 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. Now if I run this, we take a look, just like I'd hoped, I see that, okay, I've got 1, 1, but now 2 is matched up with 4, 3, 9, 4, 16. And so we're getting sort of the functionality that we would hope in at least a somewhat simple form. Another thing that we can do is we can pass in some color and line style information. And a really easy way to do this is we can pass in a string where the first character in our string is going to be indicate the color. So if I say R, that's saying make it red, and the second is going to be the line style or the sort of plotting style. So if I say O here, it's going to say, this is saying, oh, use like a circle, because an O is like a circle. So I'm going to just go ahead and run this, and we'll see what happens. And we see that indeed my sort of abbreviation for red as R worked, and this O worked as well. And so if you want to get more information about like, oh, what if I didn't want red, I wanted some other color, there should be a link in the lecture to, so just like with NumPy and Python in general, the documentation is really helpful and really important to know how to access. And so here we're just taking a look at the documentation specifically for the plot command. So remember, we aliased matplotlib.pyplot to plt. And so we're specifically looking at the plot command here. And so if I scroll down a little bit, I can see, oh, which character corresponds to what style of line. And so we saw when we did an O, we got a circle marker. We could try something else, like if I put in a star here, we saw that that just said plot a star, and that seems to work out. So that's where we can get those, the line styles, and then we can also see that there are these color abbreviations. So this isn't the only way to change the color of your plots, but it is sort of definitely the most concise. And you can continue reading the documentation to see what's going on there. Are there any questions so far just about basic plotting with plot? Great. So can anyone tell me, so what data type are these things that I'm passing in? Yeah, so we can pass in lists, but internally, Matplotlib is always going to convert this data into NumPy arrays. And so when we're building our programs to process larger data sets, we will want to use NumPy arrays when we are plotting. And so we can, if we want to sort of explore how this can become more complex, let's say that we want to, okay, so that was our first plot. Now we're going to make a plot our second plot. What is our second plot going to do? We're going to plot so sort of like y equals x squared, and y equals x to the third. And we're going to want to use NumPy arrays instead of Python lists. So if we want to, let's first create some data. So does anybody remember how we say I wanted some evenly spaced data points from 0 to 10, and I want it to be a NumPy array? Can anybody remember I'm going to have to import NumPy. Import NumPy as NP. Can anybody remember a method that I can call here, or function I can call here that will generate some, let's say I want 50 evenly spaced data points from 0 to 10. What might I call from NumPy to create that? Yeah, so I can use arange. I can also use linspace. So if I want to specify my step size, I can use arange. Let's see if it gives me. Oh. So, but if I want to specify how many data points I want, I can use linspace. Either one would work. I like linspace just because for some reason it feels more natural to be like, okay, give me 50 evenly spaced data points between 0 and 10. Now what we're going to do is, okay, let's say if I wanted to plot just the sort of y equals x line using this data, what am I going to pass in? Let's say I don't care about the color yet, anything like that. Just thinking back to the example we just saw, what two arguments could I pass into plt.plot to get that y equals x line? Yeah, exactly. Because we remember my first argument's my x, my second argument's my y, and if I just want y equals x, I gotta pass in the same thing. So let's just take oh, you know what? This isn't gonna work because I didn't do plot.show. So here the sort of plot was generated, but I didn't show it, and so didn't come up. So if I add plot.show, indeed we get our y equals x line like we were hoping for. Let's say I wanted this to be green and a green line instead of a blue line. I could just use G. G is saying make it green. The dash is saying make it a line. Let's go ahead and run that. And indeed, we get our green line. So one thing, and then I guess a color/line. So one maybe nice thing about this plot function is if we want to plot multiple sort of data sets on the same plot, we can actually just pass them directly into the same plot call. So if I pass not just my t and my t in here, but also t and t squared, because this is a NumPy array, and let's just say I want to color this red, and I'm going to make it a dashed line instead of just a straight line. So what this will actually let me do is these are both going to be plotted on this exact same plot. So let's just check it out and verify that. And so we have not just our first XY pair, but also our second XY pair. And the reason that we were able to just take this NumPy array and just say, oh, square it, is because NumPy arrays are vectorized. So if this was a list, we wouldn't be able to just directly say, oh, square it, and that would be performed element-wise, right? If we wanted to square it, we'd have to loop over the array. So we can pass in multiple data sets to plot. And so since we said we wanted to also plot y equals x to the third, let's just get that in there. So if I say t and t to the third, this is going to have t as the x's and t to the third as the y's. And let's say I want to plot it in yellow triangles. this is a sort of shortcut that will get me to yellow triangles. And so I'm just going to run that. And we will see, hopefully, what we want. And yes, indeed, our third data set is plotted onto our plot.